All right, everybody. My name is Omer Jamal, and we are ready to rock today with the 60-second sales show by Atlas. Today, we have an esteemed guest, Nick Friedman. Nick, would love to welcome to the show, first of all, and would love to learn all about you. Tell us more, my friend.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. So I am the founder, and I like to say the original hunk from College Hunks Hauling, Junk, and Moving. We're a national franchise of moving and junk removal. We started with just a beat up cargo van back in college. Today we have over 200 locations, roughly 300 million in annual sales. So we've come a long way from those humble beginnings. But I like to think of myself as a definitely a purpose-driven leader and very passionate about entrepreneurship.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there, my friends. So let's start at the roots, right? We want to learn about your story, how you've sort of grown the business. T Tell the audience more about the early days to the mid days to where you are today.
Yes. Well, I don't think very many kids, myself included, grew up saying, "Hey, I want to own a moving business or a junk business when I grow up or graduate college." And somewhere before my senior year of college, we were just looking for some ways to make some extra money. My best friend from high school, actually, his name's Omar. His mom had a beat up cargo van from her furniture store, and so she was like, why don't you guys borrow the van, make some money, move furniture, haul junk? And then she looked us up and down and said, "You guys could be college hunks who haul junk." And we kind of laughed about it at first. That was actually the first time I think anybody had called me a hunk, but nevertheless, gave us the confidence to try it out. We thought it was a funny way to make the phone ring. Might be something different that people typically associate with movers and haulers. And most college kids would quit after college and go on and do something in the real world, which we did very briefly. And said, you know what? Why don't we try to make this a year-round venture? So we went and started the business full time, doing the work ourselves. I would say we were driving the trucks, answering the phone, hauling the junk. We had an 800 number routed to our cell phone. AI didn't exist back in those days, of course. And so people would call the 800 number to complain about driving. I'd be in the driver's seat answering the phone, saying we'll fire those guys when they get back to the office. So, I call it a 20-year overnight success. We started franchising it a few years after launching on a full-time basis. And that's kind of been that was the origin story and kind of the genesis of how we got here. One other, I guess, claim to fame is we were on episode one, season one of Shark Tank. So that was actually a really cool experience and kind of helped put our business on the map on a national, platform.
That's awesome. Did you guys close the deal with them?
No, we got an offer from Robert Herjavec, and we ended up turning it down. His valuation that he gave us would have been worth 100x today. So probably good that we didn't turn it down from a financial standpoint. But always hindsight whether he would have helped us get here faster. But because it was episode one, season one, they weren't television celebrities yet, so we didn't know the
Mm.
sort of Shark Tank effect that these guys would have with the businesses they invested in. To us, they were just kind of these random faces behind a desk when we went in to pitch on episode one.
Yeah, he is my favorite shark, though. He's
One of the most
how's he?
level-headed, a little bit less dramatic as, say, Mr. Wonderful, who actually called us greedy pigs, and said we'd never make it to his side of the table. So I'm kind of waiting for Shark Tank to bring us back as investors so we can kind of sit next to him and be like, "Hey, I'm going to outbid you on that deal." So
That's
that's
funny.
yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I've had interaction with Mr. Wonderful. He was part of a video promotion thing that we did at my previous company. So I know what you mean. But that's good. Good on you guys. So I gotta ask before we shift away from this Shark Tank conversation, is it actually nerve-wracking and as dramatic as they make it, like live on TV? What's that experience been like for you?
Yeah, beyond nerve-wracking for me because number one, we weren't really comfortable or experienced in pitching to investors to begin with. And number two, we know that it's being filmed for national television. So these like cameras are swirling around. The segment felt like we were in front of them for an hour. It probably realistically was at least 30 minutes. And they, of course, chop it down to like a 5 minute, 8 minute segment for television. So a
Hmm.
lot of back and forth. Obviously, a lot of stuff gets talked about that doesn't end up making it on air. So I felt like I'd gone like a heavyweight fight, 12 rounds when it was over. I had my hands on my knees trying to catch my breath just from the angst of thinking about what I was saying, the fact that it was going to be viewed by a national audience, and B, trying to not trip over my numbers or my pitch or, be able to, respond to what the Sharks were throwing at us as far as curveballs were concerned. So it was, I would say, relatively unproduced, unscripted, organic, and definitely intense.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine that, Nick, right? Like you said, it was 20 years ago. You just got out of college, business started, you're on the trucks and answer calls yourselves, and then now you got this big feature which sort of gives you the natural presence. So that's I could imagine how nerve-wracking that could be, but kudos to you and your success, right? You learned something from that experience, and that's where you are today.
Yeah, without a doubt, I always tribute, it's kind of cliche to say, but the old persistence, grit, resourcefulness, kind of those muscles that I think get attributed to entrepreneurship in general, for sure, because it's not like we created something totally disruptive. Obviously, we had a creative brand, very intentional focus on culture and service, but it was trucks and labor, which anybody could do. So I think just the persistence, brute force over time, the micro habits turned into macro results. So
Yeah.
I definitely am a big champion of those focus areas.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell us more about that. So not a lot of entrepreneurs take that shift from a local business and then go to turn that into a franchise model, right? And then actually scale it to where you have scaled it. So talk to us a little bit more into the journey after Shark Tank and what led to those decisions that allowed you to franchise, and then what kind of hurdles you kind of had to deal with because not a lot of people understand what it takes to actually get to the franchise model. It's scale at one to many approach. So
Yes.
I'd be curious to hear that.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it blind ambition, but I might describe it as naive ambition. Like we were ambitious young guys that were, thought we could build something that would be a national brand beyond just a couple local guys driving around in a truck. So we did always have this long-term lofty vision. And we read a book called The E-Myth Revisited by a guy named Michael Gerber. A very simple book. It's about this woman with a bakery, but it kind of describes the importance of learning how to scale by creating systems and working on the business, not in it. And when we read the book, it was sort of the next light bulb moment for us because it felt like it was written about us, even though it was not written about movers and haulers. It was written about a woman in a bakery. But it was like, okay, if we're ever going to have another truck, let alone another location, which is what we want to, create, we've got to start documenting how we do everything. And then the book talked about franchising, meaning make your business replicatable, even if you're not going to go down this franchising path. But it sort of planted in our minds this notion of franchising the business. And the reason I say naive ambition is like I think at the time we didn't realize how difficult become a franchisor really is. And they don't tell you that you need at least 50 to 100 franchisees, getting a small royalty from each of them to really have a scale at scale, franchise company. And
Mhm.
so we started down the path. We joined the International Franchise Association and just sort of did a lot of things, like I said, kind of naively or blindly, but I
Just
think the right
brute
brute
forcing it
force.
through.
And once we were down that path, and it was very difficult and it was a lot of pain, we were like, well, we're not turning around and we're not quitting. So let's just keep going. And ultimately, we made it to 50, 150, 100, 150 franchises. And obviously, we're on the other side now where, the royalty stream and the brand is much bigger than, it ever was. And the business we ever could imagine it would be. And the business has caught up to all those things as well. And now for me, it's just more about maximizing the potential that the brand and the platform can ultimately become.
That's awesome. Well, you're an inspiration to many, myself included, Nick. Not a lot of people are able to get to that level where you have been. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs as part of what we do here at Atlas, and these are primary local business owners. I've spoken to more than 2,000 of them so far, just one-on-one myself.
Wow.
And that blind ambition that sort of takes you to the next level. Sometimes that's the secret sauce. Sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
Right? So congrats on all your success, and that's super, super exciting. I'd love to learn a little bit more, Nick, on some of the tactical stuff that you have sort of seen or implemented as part of your business that you think has catapulted you guys to where you are, right? Is it technology? Is it branding? What do you guys do? After all, this is the 60-second sales show. So what do you guys do on the sales side as well? Give us
Yeah.
some color on that side, please.
Yeah, so foundationally, and it's very cliche to say, but we put in place a company purpose, a set of core values that we believe in, we preach, we reinforce daily. We say it's not what's on the walls, meaning not the posters on the walls, it's what's in the halls, meaning the people that build the business over time that embody the values and the purpose. So we read Good to Great by Jim Collins, we read all these other books, went to these conferences, and we made a very intentional focus that was going to be foundational for our business. We made a shift when we realized that the warm and fuzzy stuff doesn't work if it is not accompanied by performance-based toughness and accountability. So, as my business partner describes, he says we got to have the right balance of Wall Street and Sesame Street. If
Mm.
it's all Wall Street, then there's no loyalty, there's no passion. People are stabbing each other in the back to get ahead. If it's all Sesame Street, then there's no accountability, there's no performance-based expectations, there's no results. So we've got to strike the right balance between the two. So I think finding that balance and that sort of yin and yang of focusing cold on numbers but being warm and compassionate with people has allowed us to become a very iconic performance-based culture that people want to be a part of, but also want to perform in as well. So that would be the foundational elements. From a sales standpoint, we have an inbound call center where we field all the calls on behalf of the franchisees. We're very intentional also about building value, building trust through the conversation with our clients. We recognize, look, when they call us, they're not calling because they want to buy a pizza or they want to shop around. They're calling us because they need to move or they have junk that they want to get rid of. So, how do we solve those pain points through discovery questions? How do we convert that lead into a booking, which ultimately turns into a completed sale, which hopefully then turns into a repeat referral opportunity because we're not selling subscriptions as a company. So, simple basics, blocking and tackling from a business perspective. But I always say we start with the why, the purpose, the where, or the destination, the who is the core values, who we want in our organization, and then the how and the what is really kind of the tactical stuff, which you mentioned, and that's sales scripts, getting the right tools from a technology standpoint, measuring what we want to ultimately manage and what we ultimately want to produce. And again, to me, these are sort of all business fundamentals. Execution is the hard part. Like knowing what needs to get done is the easy part.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta ask Nick, you make it sound simple. So I gotta ask, because culture and accountability are two very hard to do things, right? And culture sounds like some of the tactical stuff that you already shared, so thank you for that. How do you hold, from a leadership standpoint, how do you hold your team accountable? What are the weekly, daily things that are happening
Yeah,
in the business today that's making sure that
yeah.
everybody's accountable?
It's also a cliche slogan, what gets measured gets managed. And you can't, if you're playing a sport and there's no scoreboard, how do you know if you're winning? And
Hmm.
so we've got to create score to know what we're trying to produce, whether it's number of leads, conversion percentage, average job size, client satisfaction scores, franchisee satisfaction scores. All of those things are things that we created into a dashboard that, like, if you're flying a plane or driving a car and you want to see, make sure everything's, flowing, or you get red lights blinking if something's out of whack. And so, we measure those things consistently, and then we try to maniacally move them and improve them over time. And so, yeah, we try to make it very clear to people what they're accountable for, what numbers that they can actually impact,
Hmm.
depending on what role they're in. We have that conversation up front when we're hiring, when we're onboarding, and then through performance conversations or just kind of touching base conversations as well on a one-to-one basis as well as a collective. So I think what happened where we made the mistake, I think a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake. You hear all this stuff about the warm and fuzzy values, and we want to have a fun culture, and you're thinking, ping pong tables and bean bags and cool break room and free coffee. That stuff is great. But what happened is we had a lot of that and people loved to work for us. And then the minute we saw like our numbers sliding in the wrong direction and we started trying to hold people accountable, it was almost like we offended certain people in the organization. And people were like, hey, that's mean. That's not in line with our culture. And I'm like, whoa, 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 we messed up somewhere. Like, no, performance is part of our culture. So then we just made an intentional reinforcement about communicating as leadership, like, hey, we're trying to win on the field. Yes, we want a good locker room where people feel like they belong and feel like they matter, but we're still trying to put points up on the field. And if you've got a route to run or you've got a ball to throw and you're not doing it, we've got to be able to tell you that. And building leaders is one of our core values. So we kind of shifted and said, well, what does being a great leader mean, and helping other people become a great leader? It's holding people accountable, helping them become better, and then also
Hmm.
being willing to shine the mirror on ourselves, holding ourselves accountable as well, being willing to be held accountable, as I think is an example of leading by example. And so,
Yeah, yeah, for
all
sure.
of that stuff, again, we talk about it, we try to practice it and live it, we try to reinforce it at every touch point that we can, and then eventually it becomes part of the organizational DNA. None of the stuff that I'm talking about happens overnight.
Well, that's my question actually, because we get a lot of small business owners who might not watching this pod, who might not be at the scale that you are at, and we just for you to even know, Dan Martell is a big supporter of Atlas, and he's a partner on our business.
Love his. I'm looking at his book on my desk right now. It's right. I just finished reading it. Take back your time.
That's awesome. So, we've had an influx of demand on the Atlas side due to some of that, which has been fantastic. And
Awesome.
I get the privilege to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are mentored by him and such, and you know all about that. So, you know, for someone who's maybe not there yet, um, you obviously didn't learn this on day one, right? You've been doing it for 20 years. What stage of business did you start putting in those scoreboard, I think you call it
Scorecard, scoreboard,
scorecards.
scorecard.
So,
It's never too early.
and then
Go
also,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you, Nick, when did you start doing it? And then who created all of that? That could sound so intimidating for everybody,
Yeah.
right? You have a score attached to every part of the business. Who created all of that? How did you get
Yeah.
started on that?
It's an evolution, definitely not an event. But I would say it's never too early to start trying to implement and execute sort of the best practices of execution.
Hmm.
So we started doing a daily huddle in our office because we read about it in a book, and it was about a bigger organization than ours at the time that was doing daily stand-up huddles. And at the time, we had, I think, 3 or 4 employees outside of our movers and haulers. We had like a call center employee, one franchise coach, my business partner, and maybe one kind of admin. But religiously we would stand up and we didn't have digital dashboards at the time. We had a whiteboard and we would write down what happened the day before. We would write down a core value review. We would write down if anybody had any good news or anything that people want to focus on today. So we just kind of started making it a daily habit, and it just sort of became, as we expanded, added more people, we never veered from doing that. Even in COVID, when we went, full remote for a period of time, and we still have a lot of people in remote locations, we went to Zoom huddles and figured out ways to try to engage the team virtually. And so again, happened over time, happened over repetition. It evolved a little bit, and then as far as the numbers and the dashboards, we tried, but neither my business partner nor I are very, I'll say, numerically inclined.
Yeah.
And we brought in an individual who's actually now the president of our company, but he started as the financial controller,
Mm.
and he was just a very dynamic guy. His name's Roman, but I called him Roman numerals because he knew the numbers, saw
Quick.
the numbers, was able to create a scorecard just on spreadsheets initially before things got a little bit more automated. And he was able to pull up the spreadsheets and kind of report to us how we were doing. And when we had him come in to help us create that clarity, I described to him, I was like, it was like we had muddy windshield, and all of a sudden somebody came in and just cleared the windshield, and I could see the road and see if we were
That's
driving,
awesome.
in the lines, out of the lines. And again, that didn't happen in the first 3 or 4 years. We were kind of operating a little bit more on gut and feel of the wind, which is good
How
to a
big were
certain
you
extent.
guys? How big were you guys when you brought him in?
At that time, we probably, I would say, maybe had about 20 franchisees. Maybe as a system, we were probably about a tenth of the size that we are today. So, we've quote unquote 10x since then.
Wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, it was a very helpful milestone for us to kind of get that clarity of sight on the numbers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, with growth comes different challenges, and nobody talks about those. So let's talk about the hard stuff. You told me a little bit about your call center. You told me a little bit about labor, which is kind of like the fundamental core piece of the business. How do you deal with, COVID in the middle, staffing issues, people quitting, making sure everybody stays on brand, on script,
Yeah.
at the call center, all that good stuff? How do you manage all that stuff?
Well, for one, we basically have told ourselves, and now we tell, the outside, that we're not necessarily a moving and hauling company. We are a recruiting and training organization that happens to do moving and hauling. So we just sort of like stuck a flag in this ground and said we're going to be great at recruiting, be great at training, be great at retention, and developing high performing athletes in our call center, in the field, doing the moves and hauls. And we just decided we were going to make that a core competency. And so when we made that decision, we had to sort of stand by it and start doing things to support that decision. So creating a playbook for how we onboard our team members, how we review and recognize team members throughout their tenure. How do we offboard team members if they're not either living the values or performing up to our expectations from a number standpoint. And we always say that recruiting is not an event. It's not something we did. It's something we do. Training is not an event. It's not something we did. It's something we do. And so it's an ongoing part of our business ecosystem is recruiting, training, rewarding, recognizing, retraining, re-rewarding and recognizing, coaching up, coaching out. It just becomes part of the part of the business model. But yeah, I think one of the things that I think inspired me is when I saw Nick Saban, the football coach who recently retired from Alabama. He was interviewed, and they asked him two questions that stuck with me. One, they said, how do you stay motivated? You've won all these championships. Why do you want to keep winning the next one? And he said, complacency leads to bad decisions. Bad decisions lead to bad outcomes. And so that
Mm,
stuck with me because I always thought as an entrepreneur, I would get to some, level and then just put my feet up and coast. But when he said that, for whatever reason, it just sort of opened up my eyes. Like that means I'd be complacent and somebody would come knock our business off the top or disrupt us. So I can't be complacent. And then the other thing he said, which kind of speaks more to your question, is they were like, well, you got these football players that are graduating or transferring. How do you maintain a winning team time, year in, year out? He said, well, the names on the back of the jerseys may change, but Alabama football identity stays the same. And
mm,
so, when a new player comes on campus, the existing players come and take them under their wing and say, this is how we do things here. And that was stuck with me as well. Is like we need that sort of mindset in College Hunks where, the names may change, but when people come and join the organization, at least the veterans on the organization can educate and talk about the core values and sort of lift up the A players and weed out the mediocres. And yeah, I think it's sort of, I think he also said on a good team the coach has to hold the players accountable, but on a championship team the players hold each other accountable. So I preach that as well. Is like we've got to get an
mm.
organization that does just that. And again, like if I'm putting my shoes in some of your listeners, like I would come to events and hear speakers like myself or authors or whatever, and I'd be a little bit overwhelmed because it all seemed like sort of like out of reach. But like all of the stuff I'm talking about, it starts as aspirational, and then with intention, it becomes reality. And
Mhm.
so, like I used to come home from conferences in the early days with a big stack of notes, and I'd kind of dump it on my team's desk, and their eyes would glaze over, like what does he want us to do with all this stuff? But if I go back and look at those notes, it maybe didn't happen overnight in 1 year, but over 15, 20 years, we've implemented so many of those things. And now that's, I think, what's allowed us to grow to this level and will hopefully continue to allow us to become $1 billion brand and beyond.
Amazing. Well, that ties into my next question, Nick. So, what have been some marketing and sales tactics that have gotten you guys to where you are today, and what's going to get you to the next level, which I think you just said is $1 billion. So, what do you
Yeah.
think is going to get you there?
Well, look, as we're a consumer brand, so actually one of our core values also is always branding, and we think of that as not only always putting the brand out there from the trucks to the signs to wearing the shirt with the logo on it, but also always making sure that everybody in the organization thinks of themselves as a walking, talking billboard for the brand, that they're
Hmm.
a representative embodiment of the brand. So we've got over 2,000 team members around the country that are on the ground level doing the moving and hauling. That's 2,000 potentially marketers that are out there every day, even if they're not, out passing out flyers. They're marketing by the way they conduct themselves on the truck or interact with the clients when they're in their home. And so, we made a very intentional focus on the client experience in that regard. But as far as, marketing, we've obviously embraced PR. We did Shark Tank, we've done Undercover Boss since then. So recognizing the power of publicity and mainstream media attention. Social media didn't exist before we started the business or when we were starting the business. So we've kind of embraced this new world social media era as well. Obviously now looking a lot into some of the AI solutions. But like the yellow pages were before Google, and now Google pay per click has kind of disrupted the yellow pages. We see sort of this trend where a lot of the AI and generative search is going to at least pay per click is going to evolve into something in that AI search realm as well. So we're trying to stay ahead of that curve also.
Cool.
So it's
Cool.
marketing. I forget the quote. It was like, I know that half of my marketing works. I just don't know which half. So
Oh, you
we
got you
try
got
to.
Roman. You got
That's
Roman
right. We got
numerals
Roman
too.
numerals at least now, and there's so much more technology now with attribution to be able to, tell you where the lead came from. We're
Yeah.
looking now more into top of funnel stuff, some of the TV and radio to see if we can build the brand that way. But up to this point, been a lot of digital word of mouth and kind of grassroots marketing tactics.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I'm assuming a lot of it sort of comes from Google. So people fill out like a form or something, goes to the
That's right.
call center calls them. Is that kind of the flow today?
Exactly, exactly. People, call our call center. Either they saw the truck or they found us online, or they submit a web form or a quote request. They get a call back, or they, can simply book the appointment without speaking to a person live. And I was
Yeah.
as we were preparing for this podcast. By the way, I was looking at your website as well. I'd love to learn a little bit more as it could relate to our business as well as our trash butler business.
Yeah, for sure. I gotta ask though, how fast is the response time? So lead comes in, how fast do people respond back?
I don't know the exact metric. I should. Roman will know. I have the speed to lead mandate has been something I've been pounding my fist on. I think before it was sort of as much of a focal point as it is today. So I want to say our goal is 5 to 7 seconds. I don't know if that's the reality, but speed to lead is critical. And then we also recognize that if we don't catch them in first day, the likelihood of them becoming a client just significantly
Drops.
drops off a cliff.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome. It's good to know that you are paying attention to all these numbers meticulously because not a lot of folks, I believe me, I know a lot of entrepreneurs and they kind of just like shelf things on the side, but I'm really, really glad to see that. So, you're super data driven, you read a lot, which I can sort of see. What's like your favorite book that you'd recommend to entrepreneurs, Nick?
Well, if for folks who aren't familiar with the EOS series, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, I always recommend folks to look at Traction by Gino Wickman, as well as the other books. What the heck is EOS? And is part of his book series. It's kind of what I would describe as kind of the more executional model of the E-Myth, which is the book I described earlier. Good to Great is a no-brainer. It's kind of a classic. I reread it recently because I got a chance to see Jim Collins speak at a conference, and I think it's timeless principles that are relevant no matter what size business you have. And Purple Cow by Seth Godin is another really impactful book. Uh,
Underrated book. That's an
Very
underrated
underrated,
book.
very short, easy read. The simple premise is if you're driving down a country road, you see a field of brown cows, you've seen it before, nothing remarkable about that. You keep driving. If there's a purple cow in that field, you're going to pull over, tell your friends and neighbors about it. I think he wrote it before social media, so it wasn't even like people were tweeting or, putting stuff on their story if they saw something remarkable. But the point is, you got to stand out in a crowded landscape. It's got to be more than just the sizzle. It's got to be more than just the name and colors. In our case, it's got to be the steak of the cow as well, meaning the service experience has to be remarkably different if you're going to really, create longevity over time. So those would be a handful of books that I think we've read early on, and I go back and review periodically.
That's awesome. You talked a bunch about leadership style today, Nick. So I want to know for the audience and for your team who's going to watch this, one word that describes Nick and why that word.
Relentless,
Mm.
relentless. I think I look back actually when I was an athlete in high school and college. I was never the most talented, but I recognized very early on at a young age that the coach would put me in if I was the one diving for the loose balls or taking the charge on defense or fighting for that rebound. And so for whatever reason, that kind of got programmed into me that you can sort of. Trump talent with hard work in some instances. And so uh, again, I think relentlessness is relevant, and I've studied a lot of the great entrepreneurs, and I agree that that sort of is ingrained in them, whether it's Elon or Bezos. Actually, little known fact. Amazon, before it was Amazon, Jeff Bezos called it relentless.com. If you go to
Mm.
relentless.com, it redirects to Amazon's website.
Wow. I did not know that. I did
I only
not
know
know.
that because actually one of my random side quests is I did a movie, a biopic about Jeff Bezos, and that was part of the movie script. So that was kind
Gotcha.
of a little
Gotcha.
tidbit I learned in the
So
process.
athlete mentality, obviously you're super big on that and that's part of your culture. You referenced it a few times. You said you played basketball. What position did you play?
So I'm the first in my family to crack 6 feet, barely, and so I played point guard. I was able to play at a Division III college
Nice.
in undergrad, and that's as far as my basketball career took me. But to your point, it gave me a lot of passion around leadership, teamwork, execution, what it means to try to win. And so I like taking some of those principles into the business side of things just because, sports is fun. You want to try to
Absolutely.
gamify
Not
the,
many, not many people talk about that, but being an entrepreneur is like being an athlete. You need to have that. It's just being an intellectual athlete instead of a physical
I,
athlete.
I need to record that and share it with my wife because she used to give me a hard time about all the traveling I was doing. And I was like, I'm a corporate athlete. She goes, if I wanted to marry an athlete, I would have married an athlete. So, she gave me a hard time when I tried to use that line on her.
No, it matters a lot. It matters a lot. I played professional sports when I was younger too, and it's some of the
Wow.
philosophies that you mentioned. It's something that I share daily with our team
Yeah.
as well.
What was
So,
your sport, if you don't mind me asking?
I played a few sports. When I was younger, I actually used to play professional cricket. Like I probably was
Wow.
on the under 18 national team when I'm talking like when I was
Crazy.
11 years old and such. So I probably would have been to the national team, but my family moved to Canada. But I remember the 6 a.m. practices Saturday, Sunday
Yeah.
morning, so I didn't have weekends, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like any sport. Team sports, I think, builds discipline, builds unity, builds culture, and what doesn't get measured doesn't get accomplished. You bring that out in the field one day or another.
Absolutely. The biggest difference in sports and business is in sports, at least if you're at a professional sports team, you can actually see the player's body of work before you sign them to the team. You can watch game film, you can see their stats, you do all the interviews and physical tests as well. Business, we're kind of guessing, right? We're going off of, the resume, what they said in the interview. You're talking to some of their past bosses to find out how they did. You're using some, personality profiling. So we've got to give ourselves grace too, because I think I read that I think it was like uh, even the Fortune 100 companies get the hire wrong 30% of the time. And then you look at the football teams or basketball teams, they get the draft pick or the free agent signing incorrect, and they've
Yeah.
got all that information and data and analytics to go off of. So you're not always going to get the best player or make their best decision, but talent optimization is key when you're
Absolutely,
building
and
a
I could
team.
I could totally relate to what you're saying too, that hard work beats talent sometimes. I picked up tennis when I was 14, 15, and
Wow.
I played tennis throughout my high school, throughout university as well. Out in Canada, so the D leagues are classified a little bit differently, but it was provincial, right?
Wow.
And playing a solo sport is very different than playing a team sport, and you learn totally different things associated with it as well. So. Sports and business go hand in hand. I think Mark Cuban talks about it. Like he literally wrote the book, right? How to win
Mhm.
at the sports of business, I believe it's called.
That's right.
Um, was he at the he probably wasn't there at the
No, he came, I think, in season 2 or 3, and that's really when the show took off because he was already kind of a known, celebrity, and he's, I think, was the rocket fuel that show needed.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So Nick, how do people find out about College Hunk? If they want to learn about you, they want to learn about
Yeah.
College Hunk, plug us. Give us a little bit.
Yeah, well, you being in Canada, we still have franchise opportunities available. I know there's obviously a big competitor of ours that's based there and done very well there as well. So you can go to collegehunksfranchise.com to learn about the franchise opportunities. You can go to nickfriedman.com if you want to connect with me on any of the social media or just ask follow-up questions. And of course, for moving or junk removal, if you've got a location in your area, you can just search College Hunks and find our moving and hauling operations.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure having you today with us, Nick. This again is Atlas, a 60-second sales show. And this is where we talk about sales deals before your coffee goes cold. See you guys on the next pod. Take care.